are you listening to? Straight Talk with Kim and Carolyn.
Welcome to Straight Talk with Kim and Carolyn. We've got a great show tonight. We have Representative Karianne Lisonbee, who is a little bit in the in sort of focus because of SB 174, which was meant to destroy the lives of all women on the planet.
Yeah, well, all birthing people.
All birthing people.
Yeah.
And and which is going to so radically reform what we do in Utah and what we believe in Utah. We are talking about the recent SCOTUS case in where Roe v. Wade. Now, let's be careful in how we describe it, because it's been described as overturned. But really what happened was the court said, this is not for the federal government. This needs to go back to the states, which, if you're big on federalism and states' rights and things like that, you like that to happen in a lot of cases.
Especially because we can all acknowledge, I hope, that the right to privacy equals right to abortion. All of that equation was never in the Constitution in the first place. And even Democrats historically have acknowledged that.
Well, you sound like you've read the thing.
Yeah. Well, I haven't, but I know a few things.
So let's welcome
what thing?
Representative Karianne Lisonbee, representing, I forgot, District 14, because all the boundaries have changed. So did your number change?
Mine didn't.
Okay, so that's kind of lucky. You didn't have to change signs like other people we've had. So tell us about SB 174 and kind of what was behind that, and now what happens?
Sure. It's a great question. So basically, SB 174 was a trigger bill. So if Roe v. Wade was overturned, which, I mean, they do say, Alito says in his decision that Roe and Casey are both overturned. Right? So, but the effect is that they're turning the decision-making process back to the states and the people, which I think is the important point that you just made. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so the trigger upon overturning of Roe v. Wade would outlaw abortion from implantation in Utah, except for cases of rape, incest, life or health of the mother, or a terminal fetal condition as determined by two competent physicians. Okay,
so this happened, and so are you hearing? I mean, what are you hearing from Utahns about
from
this?
Utahns?
Mm-hmm. About our bill.
Majority. Sure. So the majority of Utahns that I'm hearing from are ecstatic. They love the fact that we have made this choice in Utah legislatively. They support that, and they support legislators who support that. I've heard from a very small minority of Utahns that are disappointed. And I've heard from an overwhelming number of out-of-staters who are also disappointed. And when I say disappointed, I mean swearing and screaming with all caps and saying ridiculous things that no civil person would ever say to another human being.
Yeah. So, but this is interesting, though. You make the point that a lot of this reaction is coming from people who are not even in the state. And one of the beauties of our system is that states are supposed to be sovereign in many respects and are supposed to be able to make these kinds of decisions for themselves. And those who don't support this, who live in another state, aren't affected by what our state does and the decisions that the majority here vote for, the representatives that they vote for, who make these kinds of laws and make these decisions. So that's actually an interesting take, because it seems to me like the more the federal government has done, the more, and where they've taken power inappropriately, the more citizens think that they have the right to judge others and tell them what to do, because they have had this overarching governmental force to do that for them for many years.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting? generally women vote in higher numbers than men in a lot of places. The arguments made, that men shouldn't be deciding what happens with women's bodies, right?
Yeah.
Well, the majority of justices on the Supreme Court that decided Roe were men. The majority of justices on the Supreme Court now are men. So why is this a bad thing to turn it back to the voting populace, right? That is probably majority woman. We would then determine how our legislative landscape looks. And in my opinion, that is the perfect solution.
Yeah, that's a really good point. When you turn things over to, and I think this was even in the decision, right? The voice of the people and through their representatives, you end up with what these people are claiming they wanted in the first place. Yeah, that's interesting.
So Representative Lisonbee, you are also known as a very strong Second Amendment supporter and proponent, and I think we've talked with you before on Second Amendment issues. Also, a very big week for that. So I, around sort of my own dinner table in my own circles, I've heard some of my friends and associates question the difference. Why is it that one day the court said this is a federal protection, and then 2 days later, no, this is going back to the states? And so first of all, big civics education fail, that they don't understand that difference. But why don't you explain why that is fundamentally the two different decisions the court made?
So are you talking about the New York decision?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that was a huge one. And I think it's different in one way in particular, and that is that the court actually told states what they could not do, because the Second Amendment is an enumerated and guaranteed fundamental right, which is different, right? The court just said Alito just said in his opinion that there is no fundamental right to abortion. Therefore, it's left to the states to decide, right? So those are two huge differences already in these two decisions that came down from the court. They've sure been busy this week. And so basically what the court has said is, if you're a permitting state, and I think there are 8 may permit states, Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, California, can't remember the other ones. Now you cannot be a may permit state. If people meet the minimum qualifications for obtaining a concealed carry permit, it has to be issued. The rest of us are shall permit states. Utah's a shall permit state. And they decided people deserve to have that right to conceal in public and to carry in order to enable themselves for self-protection.
Which it seems to me is becoming a right that we are increasingly recognizing as being necessary in this brave new world we've encountered over the past couple years, right?
Well, definitely over the last week, the rhetoric has just been harsh. And, what's interesting is for the right to be so heavily criticized over the last year for inciting violence, encouraging violence, for having violent rhetoric. I haven't seen the kind of rhetoric we've seen this week from the left, and anything goes.
Well, and I've even read things. I don't know if the two of you have seen this. I assume you have. But yeah, I do have an unfortunate habit. I only spend maybe 15 minutes a day, but of going on Twitter. And that is such a cesspool.
Don't do it.
I have noticed. And let me just say, Kim, when you talk about the civics education fail, that is the narrative on Twitter. And I think that's where people are getting this from, right? This is circulating in social media. Well, I don't understand. They said, gun law can't be left to the states, but that you have to put abortion at the state level. Well, to your point, like read the stinking Constitution and understand the very most basic principles about the way our system functions. I mean, that's just kind of a stupid question. What's that?
No, the first enumerated right in the Utah Constitution is the right to self-defense, right? I mean, we recognize that in Utah, it's probably stronger than the United States Constitution. And that decision, I think it was written by Thomas. I read a bit of it. He talked about that numerous states, had in their constitutions provisions for the right to self-defense prior to what we've known as our most recent, I don't know, what do you call it? Precedents. But
yeah,
I think it's interesting, our law is stayed now as of about 3:30 today.
Okay.
SB 174.
Yes.
So I was going to ask that.
Yeah.
I did hear that there was a TRO that was submitted, and
I think this highlights a little bit the distinction you were trying to make between individuals on the right and individuals on the left. So we've heard screaming, we've heard blood is on your hands. I mean, Senator McKay had a bloody sheet left on his lawn saying their blood is on your hands.
Wow.
On Saturday morning. I don't know if you heard about that.
No.
So, I mean, just escalated rhetoric, screaming, saying the most offensive, disgusting things. And yet I don't hear anybody on the right screaming to Judge Stone in Salt Lake City, who has allowed for an emergency injunction that, there may be 100 babies' blood on his hands.
Yes.
Nobody's going and trying to thwart the work of the courts and the criminal justice system in Utah, because we on the right are civil and respectful for the most part.
Yeah.
In my opinion, nobody's going and doing that. But yet that is all I have heard all weekend, is that I have blood on my hands of women who, if they can't kill their babies through elective abortion, will have to commit suicide. So,
suicide's the new threat, isn't it? That's kind of the new threat for everything. Like, they cannot be held accountable for those decisions if you do not allow them to do what they want to do, regardless of its impact on other people, regardless of constitutional protections, in this case, of another life, then they'll kill themselves. I mean, that sounds like an abusive boyfriend.
yeah.
Or
Okay,
they'll just withhold sex.
Yeah, I love that one. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
let me
we've
read
been
it.
asking you to do that. Control yourself.
let me read a tweet that's kind of gone around today. I don't want to repeat her name, but she says, if it was about babies, we'd have excellent and free universal maternal care. You wouldn't be charged a cent to give birth, no matter how complicated your delivery was. If it was about babies, we'd have months and months of parental leave for everyone. If it was about babies, we'd have free lactation consultants, free diapers, free formula. If it was about babies, we'd have free and excellent child care from newborns on. If it was about babies, we'd have universal preschool and pre-K and guaranteed after-school placement, because that is a binary choice. Either we, the people, pay for your pregnancies, births, deliveries, and raising your child.
Yeah.
Or we're supposed to just be okay with you killing your child. And what do you have to say as a lawmaker when it comes to that responsibility, that personal responsibility, also the realities of what we have funded for assistance, and what resources are out there for maybe women who are experiencing an unplanned pregnancy?
Yeah, so we've expanded Medicaid for all kinds of birth control in Utah. So you can go in, you can get your IUD implanted. If you are on Medicaid up to 200% FPL, that will be paid for. We made it so you could go to a pharmacy, and without going to a doctor, you could get your birth control. Really simple. You go to the pharmacy, you get your prescription. So we've done a ton in that direction. We passed a law, Brady Brammer's bill, requiring parental financial responsibility. We were the first state in the union that, his bill went international, made international news because it was such a novel idea that we would hold fathers responsible for creating a baby also. And that's one of the favorite arguments of the left, right? Is why don't you hold fathers responsible? Well, we are in Utah. We're doing that. I do think that the argument that if government doesn't fund, hook a lady up to a IV and pump food in her if she gets pregnant and doesn't want the baby, and we'll just take care of her until she has the baby, and then we'll care about the baby at that point. Then we've proven that we care about it. I think that just really ignores that fundamental argument that in this case, the Supreme Court with the Roe v. Wade decision came out so conservative on, as far as not conservative as far as left and right, but just they really didn't. They could have actually stated that the right to life applies to the unborn, right?
Yeah.
They could have gone all that way, and yet the left's screaming. They're not acknowledging that the court didn't go as far as they could have.
Yeah.
But they certainly could have acknowledged that human life, that unique life, has the right to live, and they didn't. So anyway, I think it's really important that we acknowledge that, sometimes life is hard. I really don't like the argument, and maybe this is just me. I don't like the argument that it would be better to kill a baby that might suffer. Because, I suffered when I was young, and I know a lot of people who have suffered throughout their lives. And I know that we can't compare our suffering to other people. And I certainly wouldn't want to minimize anybody else's suffering, because I know what mine felt like. But I'm grateful that I had the opportunity to live. And I think that it's an abusive idea to people to tell them that if they suffer in their life, that it would have been better for them to be dead.
Yeah.
I think that that's harmful. I remember in judiciary, when we were hearing a bill, a young girl came in and she testified that because she had suffered in her life, that she wished her mother would have aborted her.
Wow.
That's abusive.
Yeah.
That's horrible.
It's horrible.
That poor young girl. So, I care about people. I care about all people, and I care about their suffering. I suffered. I don't necessarily think it's government's job to cure all suffering or to prevent all suffering. I don't know that if we took that to the logical extreme, that any of us would want to live in that kind of world. Right. But I do think that we can do things that help alleviate extreme need. We have a good safety net, and the Republican women in the House are looking at expanding some of that to include maybe some more maternity leave for state employees, expanded child care pipeline with a free market approach, not a government funding approach necessarily. And so we're looking at these solutions, and we're trying to where we can make changes, especially with the cost of adoption, right? That's crazy expensive, since we've, created policy to the point where nonprofits are no longer willing to facilitate those in a way that was super inexpensive compared to where it is now with the government regulation that's attached. So we're looking at those things and seeing if we can make a difference there. And those are important conversations, and I don't want to minimize that. But I also, I would push back against the argument that if we aren't providing some sort of cradle to grave or pregnancy to delivery to the first 5 years of the child government care, that somehow we don't care about children.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting, too, that we're being asked to care about children more than the individual who made a choice, except for in cases of rape, right? Who made a choice to do something that every one of us knows and understands could lead to pregnancy. And to me, it's extremely offensive as a woman. to be told that government has to save me from my inability to grow a backbone and tell somebody, yeah, I'm not going to get as graphic as I would like to. Tell somebody that I'm not going to have sex with them. I'm too weak to do that or to control the situation in which I do that, and I need the government to allow me to kill my baby as a result.
Well, and even then, I mean, okay, you're talking about those exceptions that we've sort of had in,
Which
in
I
place
just
for a
said,
while,
right? Outside
right.
of those
Outside of it.
exceptions,
Right, right.
it is, we are being told by some women that they are incapable of dealing with this themselves without government stepping in. And I don't know what kind of people they are, but that certainly isn't me. That's very unfortunate that that's how they view women.
So one of the criticisms I heard from a friend yesterday was the notion that rape, so long as there is there's evidence that there was a rape, that the person reported the rape, reported the crime. What can you say to that? Why was that important to include in the bill?
Right. So, and thank you for going to that, because I did want to make that point. In my opinion, people did not have a choice when they were raped or if they're a victim of incest. That's tragic. It's horrible. They didn't deserve that to happen to them. And because they didn't have a choice, that's why we have those exceptions in Utah law that are outlined. And I think those are wise exceptions. That doesn't necessarily mean that the state of Utah is encouraging people who are victims of those crimes to get an abortion, but just that they have that choice at that point. So when you're a victim of rape or incest, I think there's an argument to be made, and personally for me, I feel strongly that it's important to report. One of the reasons I think it's so important is because it can actually prevent future crimes against other people, right? And that's why I ran that bill, HB 281, allowing people to have a de novo review of their case if local law enforcement or district attorney declined to prosecute. So they could go to the AG's office and get that de novo review and have the opportunity to have their case heard at that level. That bill is working really well. We ran a fix-it last year that required law enforcement to turn over all the evidence and paperwork. That was one of the issues. But that bill led to the identification of a serial rapist in Utah. Now think if all those women hadn't reported, right? And they weren't able to create that pattern, that cross-jurisdictional pattern to find that man, to identify him. That's why reporting is so important. I know that there's an argument out there that some women would be reticent to report. If the decision, that you're trying to weigh is, I really want to get an abortion because I was raped, all you have to do is just go and fill out the report. That's it.
Yeah. Now that's what I was going to bring up. So I also, when I served in the legislature, worked in the area of reporting crimes of a sexual nature too, and that there is that a faction out there that is concerned that women won't report. But for the purpose of SB 174, there doesn't have to be a conviction. There doesn't have to be a trial. There doesn't have to be prosecution. There doesn't even have to be an investigation. Just simply a report that just says this tragic thing has happened, and
right.
In that case, a woman could avail herself of or choose an abortion.
Yeah. And a lot of people are bringing up the ectopic pregnancy argument. Obviously, Utah does not define the removal of an ectopic pregnancy as an abortion, nor do they define a miscarriage as an abortion. Some doctors are calling those things abortions. That's unfortunate, but that is not in Utah law. And so I think it's important that we clarify that.
Well, and sometimes medically, the loss of a pregnancy might be termed a spontaneous abortion, and that is also not the same thing.
Right.
as an elective abortion. What
That's right.
as we kind of wrap this up, what do you want people to know about this legislation, about moving forward?
Yeah.
So, I read through Planned Parenthood's arguments in their case against the law in Utah. They seem very specious to me. In fact, they basically follow a lot of the lines of argument that the Supreme Court in the Dobbs decision actually dismissed out of hand as specious. So I think it's really interesting that that would be their the basis of their lawsuit. But nonetheless, it seems that we may have an activist judge who has a predetermined outcome in mind. We'll see. June 7th is when the state must submit their arguments. June 11th will be the hearing for the preliminary, or for the temporary injunction. Is that what it's called? Actually, oh, that was a loud noise. And then, sorry about that. I think my sprinkler's just and then if the arguments go over time on the 11th, they'll extend the hearing to June 13th or July 13th. So at that point, we will know if there is a longer term injunction in place. And then the state will decide how to act after that point. But I have a feeling that this will go to another jurisdiction.
So what is their claim? I haven't seen that yet.
Planned Parenthood's claim? Mm-hmm. Is that what you're asking?
Yes. What is their claim?
Okay. So, sorry, hold on a sec. It's fairly long. So they are arguing. They're basically arguing. So in the Dobbs case, those concerns that were dismissed were bodily integrity, personal autonomy in matters of family, medical care, and faith, and women's equal citizenship. And that's basically what they're arguing. And they cite the Constitution, the Utah Constitution, stating that somehow the Utah Constitution can. Are you waving to me?
No, sorry, we have an issue with your screen. A box. Yeah. Okay. I wanted to make sure we could see your face.
Time out.
You were being blocked. Okay.
Anyway, so those are their main arguments, and then there's some others, and I'm happy to send you just a summary of their arguments. But they're arguing the same things: bodily integrity, and personal autonomy in matters of family, medical care, and faith, and women's equal citizenship, citing the Utah Constitution. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I do think in the end we'll be victorious, but we'll see.
Yeah. Well, and the fact that could be, I don't know, held up, and it sounds like on much the same grounds that the original case, on many of the same grounds that the original case used to argue before the Supreme Court, right? So it just seems like a stalling technique in many ways.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate. So.
Yeah, it is unfortunate.
Yeah. Well, we will continue following this, as I'm sure you will, very closely. We wish you the best of luck and the state the best of luck as they work to really protect the lives of these children in the womb. So thank you.
Where can people follow you?
I'm on Facebook, and my cell phone is online, and I have an email online. So.
Okay.
Great.
All righty.
Thank you. Thanks for coming on. This is a timely issue. We're hearing something new every day on this issue and many others. So thanks for joining us, Representative.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes.
Have a good night.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye. So much going on right now. And it is interesting that that case was filed pretty immediately.
Right.
Yeah. In the state. And that judge took quick action.
Which judge is it? She said Stone?
Yeah, I heard it on the news, and it was not a name that I'm familiar with. Yeah, so I don't remember.
Also, for our
Stone or
senators
something
who
else.
are up for election tomorrow, that our Utah State Senate has a role of advice and
Yes.
consent. So don't put activists, liberal judges.
Yeah, we seem to have a problem with that sometimes in this state. I feel like, doesn't make sense. We do a lot of compromising to get to the wrong solution, it seems, oftentimes. So anyway, we'll be watching that and a whole lot of other issues in the coming days. So thanks for joining us for this episode of Straight Talk with Kim and Carolyn. I'm Carolyn.
I'm Kim.
Yes, my voice is not as low today. So we're more, we sound more similar today. So anyway, you please like us, follow us, share with friends. You can find us anywhere you get your podcasts. Also on Rumble, YouTube, Facebook. And I think I covered it. Thank you, Fosmu, for your work as always.
You're welcome.
And we'll see you next time.